All right, let's dive right in. We're going to pull back the curtain on a hidden connection that shapes your world every single time you go online. A powerful link between our society, the search engines we use, and, believe it or not, our own minds. So let me start by asking you a question, and it sounds almost ridiculously simple. If you ask a search engine to show you a person, what does it think you mean? The answer, it turns out, is anything but simple, and it reveals something truly profound about our digital world and about ourselves. Okay, so just take a look at this. On the left, here's a search from a country with pretty low gender inequality. And what do you see? A nice, balanced mix of men and women. Now look at the right. This is the same exact search, just from a country with high inequality, and it is overwhelmingly male. Now here's the thing. This is not some random glitch. It's a clue, a really big one. So what in the world is the secret behind this simple search? Well, that's exactly what a team of researchers decided to find out. They started with this really powerful idea. What if these search algorithms we use every day aren't these perfectly objective, neutral tools we think they are? What if instead they're just holding up a giant digital mirror, reflecting the biases that already exist out there in society? So you've got this digital mirror theory. But how do you actually go about testing that? Well, first things first, you need a reliable way to measure that real-world inequality. You need a yardstick to compare it against what the algorithm is showing people online. And the tool for that job was something called the Global Gender Gap Index, or GGGI. Now, the easiest way to think about this is kind of like a report card for countries on gender equality. It scores each nation on things like economics, education, and political power, giving them a hard number, a concrete score for their level of societal bias. So now, armed with that data, their method was actually pretty ingenious. They used VPNs to basically teleport their computers to 52 different countries. In each one, they searched Google Images for the local, totally gender-neutral word for person, and then they just counted. They tally up the ratio of men to women in the first 100 results. And what they found was, wow, it was undeniable. In nations with low gender inequality, the image results were pretty much 50-50, just as you might hope. But in the high inequality nations, the results for person were skewed up to 90% male. That whole digital mirror idea, it was looking pretty spot on. Okay, so the AI is acting like a mirror. That's a huge finding, but it immediately leads to the next, even bigger question. What happens when we look into that mirror? Does it just show us our biases, or does it actually start to change how we think? So the researchers designed a whole new experiment to get right at the heart of that question. Can a single, brief exposure to biased search results actually influence our judgments, and maybe even our real-world decisions, like who to hire for a job? And here's how they did it. It's pretty neat. First, they needed a baseline, so they asked people to imagine someone doing a really obscure profession, like a peruker, which, by the way, is an old-timey wig maker. Then came the twist. They showed them a fake Google search for that job. Half the group saw a balanced 50-50 result. The other half saw a heavily skewed 90% male result. And finally, they asked them again who they imagined in that role, and this is the critical part, who they would actually hire. And the results showed something pretty sobering. This digital bias doesn't just stay on the screen. It can have a direct line to things like paychecks and who even gets a shot at a career. So first, let's look at what they called mental prototypes, which is basically just the picture you have in your head of a typical professional. For the people who saw the balanced search results, any initial male bias they had was completely eliminated, just gone. But for the folks who saw those skewed results, that bias was actually reinforced. And this is where it gets really powerful. Because that change in their mental picture wasn't just a thought, it directly translated into their actions. The group that saw the balanced images ended up hiring more women. The group that saw the skewed images, you guessed it, they hired more men. The pixels they saw on the screen directly influenced their real-world choice. It's kind of wild. Even the researchers themselves seemed stunned by this. They used the word remarkable, that just a one-shot exposure, seeing it one time, was enough to generate real, measurable bias in both their judgments and their decisions. So when you put all of these pieces together, the societal bias, the AI mirror, and the influence on our minds, you start to see the full picture. And it's not a straight line. It's something else entirely. It's a loop. Here's exactly how this cycle works. Step 1. It starts with inequality that already exists in our world. Step 2. The AI algorithms learn from all the data our society produces, so of course they reflect its biases. Step 3.
We see that biased output and it shapes our own ideas of what's normal. And then, step 4, the real kicker, our decisions, now influenced by that AI, go on to reinforce the very inequality that started the cycle in the first place.
And that brings us to the crucial takeaway here. AI isn't a passive tool. It's more than just a mirror. By reflecting our biases back at us and then influencing our decisions, it becomes an active participant in maintaining and maybe even strengthening the inequalities that are already there. Which, of course, leaves us with one massive and, frankly, very difficult question. If our society teaches the AI, and then the AI turns around and teaches us, where on earth do we even begin to break that powerful cycle?